Hello everyone and welcome to Dragon's Hoard. I'm ecstatic that you're here with me today, and here on Dragon's Hoard we like to hoard books like it's a full-time job on our TBRs. Judge book covers, dissect magic systems, and just talk about everything that we did or didn't love so much about a book. My name is Rebecca, and on this channel I follow a very specific formatting of how I do my video reviews. Usually I start out with my introduction like I'm doing now, and then I do move into a cover review, which is where I talk about all of the design elements and what I actually thought about the cover. I give it a star rating, and then we move into things more along the lines of a general book review. That includes synopsis, my thoughts and opinions, my star rating, and spice rating is included in my thoughts and opinions. And then we'll get into things like magic systems. Sometimes there are highlights, if I would recommend the book or not, and to what audience I would typically recommend said book to. Will I continue a series if it is a series and not a standalone? And also, what are some similar reads or similar books that I have already read to this book that we are discussing today? And of course, in that case, if you do happen to get bored with anything that I'm talking about, then please feel free to look down in the description box below and check my timestamps and just go to whatever it is that interests you the most. I will mention when I have spoilers, or at least I will try to. Sometimes it slips my mind, and then I do put it in the little box below. And now that that's out of the way, let's just go ahead and jump into our cover review for this story, which is A Game of Cat and Witch by Ruby Rune. This is a paranormal shifter romance. Alright, so now that we're looking at our book cover, what we do see is our FNC and our MMC on the front cover. I get the vision, I just don't like the execution. And of course, seeing the FMC and MMC on the cover together, this feels nostalgic. This feels like 2000s, early 2000s paranormal shifter romance covers, okay? But what I don't like about the execution is that I feel like the red background just blends into the school uniform, because there's a lot of red and some black going on here, and it just feels like it's overwhelming in how much of it there is, especially the red. As far as the book cover goes, I feel like it's just overwhelming. Maybe we needed a darker background or a lighter background, maybe a gray, dark gray or something like that. That way the characters are FMC and MMC. They would contrast with it instead of kind of blending in. So that is my opinion on that. And as we can see, even our FMC, she has red hair, so it's just like she's melting into the background. And as I was saying, with the contrast, our MMC, he's clad in black, so he is just contrasting really well with the actual background. And then after looking at that, we do have some type of little gold filigree going on. It's all over the cover. We also have gold title letters. Now, for the first time in the reviews that I have done, I'm going to complain about letters. I don't like the all lowercase letters in the words Game of Cat. I don't know why, I just do not like it. I do like the font itself, I just don't like the lowercase letters. I don't understand why I don't like the lowercase letters, but it doesn't feel right to me. And overall, with all of these things going on that I do actually have some negativity towards this time, I gave this cover a 2 out of 5 stars, because it could have been much better. Alright, and now that our cover review's done, let's go ahead and jump into the synopsis. The setup for the story is interesting once you start digging into it, but it does start out with a typical magical academy setting. However, our difference in this world is that a witch must bond with a familiar to be able to continue their magical education, because if not, then they don't have the full access to the powers that they're supposed to have. So if they cannot bond a familiar, if they cannot summon and bond a familiar, then they are expelled. And if they get expelled from the school, then they are forced to live the rest of their lives on this dreary, boring island where the school is located, because for some reason, because of things that happened in the past, witches live separated from humans and shifters, okay? In the story, we follow our FNC. Her name is Avery, and we follow her through her self-discovery journey. The sun's coming for me, I'm gonna have to scoot over. Alright, that's better. So, as I was saying, we follow Avery on her self-discovery journey as she finally gets out of her moping, down and dreary mode, because she knows she's about to be expelled from this school instead of continuing in the next semesters into higher education. And she finds this book in the library, and this book tells her a different spell to be able to summon a familiar. However, this spell does include a little bit of forbidden magic, so it's not that proved. She does it anyway because she's desperate. And as it just so happens, when Avery summons this familiar, because the magic does work, even after all of these other spells that she tried has not been working. And as it just so happens, this familiar that she has managed to summon isn't just any familiar. You know, usually a familiar, it's either a magical beast or a normal animal, cat, frog, toad, turtle, whatever. Avery manages to summon a cat, but this isn't just any cat. This is actually a cat shifter. Why does this make a difference, you ask? Well, let me tell you. So as per usual, shifters, as we know, they have their animal form and they have their human form. That's still true in this story. However, as it so happens in this world of magic and humans and witches, the witches have been stuck in a hate-fueled war with the shifters for centuries. Of course, it has to be centuries. Each side is killing the other whenever possible. And because of this deep-seated hatred between both races, the shifters and the witches, now that our FMC and MFC have been brought together forcefully and bound together, because not only did she manage to summon her familiar, she also managed to bond him. So now he is stuck in a familiar bond, even if he is a shifter. And now that they're forced together in this forced proximity setting, they have to get along long enough to not kill each other, but to also be able to find a way to undo this bond. And as our two main characters, our two protagonists, are working together, they're trying to figure out how to undo this bond. We find out that things are not as they seem in the witch world, and there is a lie that has been afoot affecting both witches and shifters all this time. And as our protagonists are working together, the sun's still coming for me again. It's coming quickly. Anyways, as they're working together, they meet this important figurehead who basically just gives them clues and tells them, you know what, I really hope that you guys can work this out and you can figure out this little mystery that's going on, this little lie that's afoot, and that you'll be able to change things, because we really need some change to happen. That way, this world will be better not only for witches, but also for shifters, and maybe they'll actually get along, which is what this figurehead wants. And moving again. Alright, and while all of this is going on and they're working together, our protagonists actually managed to get into a romantic subplot. And it's a good time. Even if it isn't a long time that they're doing this, it was a good time. So for this book, now that we've mentioned the spice, I give it a 4 out of 5 chilies because it was a spicy time. The spice was spicy, okay? The scenes weren't that developed. They occurred and then it was like, hey, let's take off running and get this over with. And as for my star rating, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and I will explain that more in detail once we get into our thoughts and opinions, which is where we're going now. So, for my thoughts and opinions, what did I think about this book? For starters, I thought the concept of the book in general was very interesting, especially the feud between the witches and the shifters and having so much bad blood between them. That was a very interesting setup. I did, however, feel like there were certain things that made this book feel incomplete and unedited. What fueled this thought was partially that I felt like there were some pacing issues sometimes. So sometimes our pacing seemed to be getting along very nicely, and then sometimes it was just like a hot knife through butter, so it just slid right through really fast. And then sometimes it felt like we were trying to wade through peanut butter, like not hot, not cold, just like in the middle, sticky, hard to do anything with peanut butter. And as far as the other editing issues that I noticed, there were a few typos, but those were more towards the end of the book, so it felt a little bit like everything was going smoothly and then there was a rush deadline to get the book out. Overall, I think those were the main things that threw me off about this book, especially considering the editing and the pacing. Otherwise, I thoroughly enjoyed Felix. That's the name of our MMC, our cat shifter. He definitely has a mind of his own. He's very independent. I thoroughly despised Avery's mother. We see her in this book. She is an important figure. I won't say more because there's a spoiler in there. As for the setting and the world building itself, it seemed pretty standard for a magical academy. One of the things that was very unique, however, was the shifters. The shifters not only have their human and animal form, but they also have a monstrous form that is just mindless and terrorizes things and is just destruction incarnate. And the other thing too, the shifters, when they're in their human form, they still retain some of their animalistic characteristics. Like Felix, and we can see on the cover, he has ears, he has a tail. He retains those characteristics, as do other shifters that are mentioned in the story. They retain some type of animal characteristic, whether it be their eyes or ears, things like that. So really just a overall fun little magical university read. It's not something that you're just like blown out of the water by, but it is fun to read. And like I was mentioning, this is why I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars as far as its rating goes, because I did not feel that it was beyond that, especially considering the editing and pacing issues. So yes, I enjoyed it. Will I read it again? No, I will not. The spice was spicy. It was 4 out of 5 chili, so it could have been spicier, but it wasn't, so I'm okay with that. Now, as for our magic system in this world, our magic system is a little bit different. In this universe, witches, shifters, and humans all share the world. Magic does exist, but it does follow specific rules. For starters, humans have no magic. They are just no magic at all whatsoever, which means they rely on the witches to sell their services of being able to use magic to help the humans. And usually, when the witches do this and they get contracted, it is for healer positions. Now, witches do have magic, but most of their magic seems to stem from their familiars, which they must bond to or risk being expelled from this university, which is where they get their higher education, being able to use the healer abilities, those kinds of things. So, if they don't have a familiar, then they can't progress in the world or they can't go outside of their witch communities because they are retained within these witch communities. We don't really know why witches aren't allowed outside of their witch communities, but I suspect it has something to do with the shifter witch wars and just for the protection of humans and shifters in general. That's my opinion. I'm not sure. We don't get much elaboration on this in this book. Now, the shifters themselves, they actually do have magic, and they seem to be quite privileged as well, even though they have these monster forms, which is kind of crazy if you ask me. You would think the shifters would be sectioned off and the witches would live with the humans, but they don't. The shifters actually live with the humans, and they tend to take jobs accepting bounties to hunt down the witches. And usually these are witches that were under contract in the human portion of the world, but then these witches decide for some reason to completely abandon their contract and just go rogue. And the other thing too, like I said earlier, shifters seem to have 3 forms. Yes, that's 3. I was confused for a second. Their human form, with shifter aspects such as ears, tail, horns, sometimes their eyes are different colors, sometimes fangs, things like that. Their second form being their animal or mythological creature form, because yes, shifters can also be mythological creatures like dragons, unicorns, Pegasus, things like that. And lastly, their third and uncontrollable form, which is the monstrous form. So it's like a giant version of their animal form, but instead of having a normal head, they'll have like a skull, and all it's set on is the hunt and killing. That's it. That's all the monstrous form thinks about. Would I recommend this story to others? So this is a fairly digestible read. Everything is set up in a way so that it's very comprehensible. It's set a bit on the younger side. I believe our FMC is 21. Don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure. It might be 23. I can't remember. So average college age. The 2 things that would make me hesitate to recommend this is that in this book there is mentions of nodding, and I know some people are just like, that's a hard no for me. So be wary. But other than that, there isn't really anything else that would be like, oh no, this is absolutely crazy. So if you are interested, then please just check this book out. And of course, check the trigger warnings before jumping in, because there are a lot of dark aspects revolving the witches and the shifter war issues, the bad blood. Will I be reading the next book? So I'm actually not entirely sure on this one. It's like I kind of want to, but it didn't really grab my attention that much. And even though this is a series, in the next book we do change protagonists. So instead of following Avery and Felix, we will be following instead her sister and a dragon shifter or dragon shifters. I'm not certain if it's just 1 or 2. But right now I'm not convinced to continue the series. Maybe in the future, we will see. And as for similar reads, I do have a few that I would say are kind of similar to this book. I would recommend, of course, Once Upon a Demon's Heart by K.M. Moronova. This book does, of course, have the forced proximity vibe. It has an arranged marriage. Even though the MMC isn't technically a shifter, he does still have fangs and he has shadow magic. And I gave this book a 5 out of 5 chilies. This one was much spicier than A Game of Cat and Witch. Another book that I found very similar to A Game of Cat and Witch was Kiss of the Basilisk by Lindsay Straub. And if you've never heard of Kiss of the Basilisk before, this book is all spice, all smut. We do begin with a forced proximity setting and then evolve into a love triangle. One of the MMCs is, of course, a shifter. He is a basilisk shifter, and the other is a human prince. However, he does have capped canines, which makes him look like he has fangs. This book is a 6 out of 5 chilies because 5 out of 5 just does not describe how much smut is in this book. Another book that is similar to this is Kingdom of Flames and Flowers by author Raven Storm. This is also a shifter romance, and this time it is actually with twin dragon brothers. There is a mystery of an underlying curse and a very suspicious queen. This book I gave 5 out of 5 chilies. I wasn't too much of a fan of this book. The concept was interesting. I just didn't enjoy the writing of this book, but the spice would be a 5 out of 5 chilies. And with that, today we conclude our review of A Game of Cat and Witch. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking around. If you enjoy going over spicy romantasy, fantasy, high fantasy, things like that, then please hit that like and subscribe button down below. That way you'll be brought back next time and we can continue to talk about more fantasy aspects and magic systems. If you have any recommendations for me, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to read them. And if that's all, I will see you guys next time. Bye.